Hi, my name is Holly Dietert, and I'm a teacher for the visually impaired in Austin Independent School District. And I am the teacher of Zelda, who we're talking about and highlighting today, her success story. When Zelda was in first grade, we started with just a simple calendar system to build that trust and develop those routines. So important for her to anticipate what was going to happen next, so she would be able to work through a lesson in a routine. We did that slowly, with just one activity at a time and then a quick break. She had a little simple object calendar system that we used. She would do some table work or do an activity, eat a snack. Whatever she was doing, we would do an activity and then she'd take a little break and do another activity. And we slowly lengthened the time between those activities to where now she can sit for an hour, which she was able to do even in third and fourth grade. So it took that routine building, and it took taking her learning styles. She loved auditory. She loved music. I would just do trial and error. I'd find things, I'd pair them with YouTube videos, little songs. Usher singing the alphabet song from Sesame Street, and we had alphabet boards where she would just read the letters. It had to be fun, and many times I brought things in that weren't fun, and she would get frustrated and throw them or just refused to do them. So I just kept trying. When I found something that worked, I just built on it. I would just make it more and more challenging. Like the YouTube videos, we went from alphabet letters to CVC words. One of her favorites was the Big Pig song. And then we moved on to blend words, and then we eventually moved on to reading stories that way. Hop on Pop was the book that we read over and over again. And if I would just turn that YouTube video on of Hop on Pop, if she was having a moment where she wasn't ready to sit down and work, she'd come right to her chair and she was focused. So I just pulled that auditory in to get her to gain that attention that I needed and for her to learn. And that opened up a whole nother window for her. In second grade, we introduced tactile symbols, and I started with really simple books that just had one symbol. Like this is a book about her class. And I'm in second grade, I'm in Mrs. Ross's class, and this is a symbol for class. And then it talked about her liking to read books, so there's a symbol for book. But the Braille is always here, that's key. I always kept the Braille there, and I always showed her what the Braille was. Never gave up on it. Symbol for math. And then she was able to take these books into her classroom and she was able to read with her peers. I also did that with these books called dual vision books that we get that sighted and students that are blind can read, where they have the Braille on top of the print. And I adapted them with a tactile symbol for the animal bear. And I used stickers with space between the Braille to start introducing her to the words. She wasn't quite ready for the words, but they were always there. Well, it's important with these types of students to find ways that they can access materials. So that's when we moved up to these little books. And social stories was really important to Zelda. She loved animals, so I did a lot of books with animals. I was thinking, what does she like? And I was always pairing what she liked with the materials. That way I could engage her and gain her attention. This is a book about animals, the dog. What dogs do? She loves dogs. She loves dogs to this day. I would make the tactile symbols for the animals and then write a blurb about it. Always reading her the Braille or doing hand under hand and guiding her hand up to look at the Braille. We were really working on her reading the literacy. So we moved from the books with one symbol and then to two symbols, and then eventually I made books with three symbols. So she was reading Zelda, Mom, and Dad. So she was reading, basic sentences. I would say that by the end of second grade, I set a goal for her to learn 100 tactile symbols, and Zelda mastered 150. That was one of my surprises, how quickly and how interested she was in these symbols. They were just in her life. They were everywhere. They were on her schedule. They were in her PE class. They were in her books. They were part of her behavior plan, and it was hugely successful. After she learned 150, when we got to third grade, I thought, well, now it's time to start learning more functional Braille. It was a good transition. I just slowly started taking the symbols away. I went back to the auditory, which I still used, but I really paired the auditory key pointed. I used something called the Franklin pen, which is an auditory pen that would grab her attention, and we would read books without tactile symbols, and we would transition to books like Hop on Pop, for example. I would use YouTube videos. I used a lot of Dr. Seuss, a lot of sing-songy music books, Eric Carle, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, just books that had a lot of sing-song to them, pairing that with songs or people reading those books. And then she was tracking and listening. So she was reading and listening to those books. And then from there, we just expanded into she was reading functional Braille. She was reading sight words, her family's name, her friends' names, my name, places that she was going, her classes. She quickly went to the Braille, quickly gained those functional words, those basic sight words, and we put those into books, and she was reading those successfully, paired with the auditory, and slowly taking that away. We were doing double-space lines, and we moved Braille to single-space lines, and she quickly got that within a couple of weeks. And then now, this year we're in 7th grade, and I thought, okay, she's mastered, she's reading fluently, she's reading very interesting books. She's reading The K, she's reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. She read Oliver Twist and loved that this year. Just a sponge for literacy. I'm going to challenge her the next step. The next step is contracted Braille. And I never dreamed that Zelda would read contracted Braille. And here we are today. She has mastered almost 60 Braille contractions, and I'm so proud of her. It's so difficult to learn contractions, and you know, the dream of, I told her mom early on, I don't know if we're going to get to contracted Braille. That's my goal. That is my ultimate goal, to get her there. And it's been a journey, but we're there. And to me, that's a success story to really celebrate.